Hello, adventurer. It's good to see you. You have made it to the morning grind.
Welcome, welcome.
It's the live stream at the beginning of the Geekverse, where we talk about all types of topics in geekdom, gaming, and fantasy, with an emphasis on being constructive and creating the things that we want to exist in the world.
It's all on the grind, Sizemore. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of adventures to be had today. Dungeons to explore and monsters to slay, and who knows what a random encounter might send our way. That's why we have to prepare, so settle in now for the morning grind with your favorite beverage in hand.
Tea? Or maybe something a little stronger. I've got a few bottles of the old Wynyard left.
Whatever you want. Pull up a chair.
Dude.
If you're feeling fancy, how about a cappuccino? Or a frappuccino? Or how about an espresso?
Just tea, thank you.
Sounds good to me, Gandalf. Whatever you want. I'm just glad you're here.
Everyone is welcome. You can just watch if you want. You don't have to worship anything you don't want to worship.
Thank you, Mike. But be forewarned.
Sometimes we get really strange characters around here.
Wait, what's that you say? Why can't you come and be a part of the stream?
My wife would disown me.
Oh no, I bet she'll be fine with it. Come on in.
Am I scared for my safety? No.
What are we supposed to do?
Everybody do the secret handshake.
Secret cultist handshake.
Oh, now do wizards who love each other.
This, my friend, is a science.
I still don't have gifts, but it's fine.
It's all on the grind, son. Can't be too fine, can't be too coarse.
Dude, this would be a sick place to bring the band.
Indeed it would be, Dave. It really would. I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. Glad to have you here. Oh, look, here's someone new.
Is this the cultist meetup?
Yes it is.
Come to hang out? Please accept me. I have nothing else.
Okay, we accept you. Everyone's welcome here.
Brought some snacks.
Well, that makes things even better.
You want some coffee? I don't drink coffee. You sure? It's cultist coffee. What makes it cultist coffee? I'm a cultist and I'm drinking it. Oh. Then I'll have some.
What exactly is going on here?
I'm seeing more people coming in. Welcome. It's so great to have you. Oh, and look, here comes another stranger.
Can we help you?
Yes, fellow cultists. I could really use some food.
Oh yeah? Welcome. We have donuts.
Oh, it's me. I'm glad I'm here. I'm sure you have a few questions for me, though.
What's your name? Who do you work for? What god do you worship?
Great questions, Rob.
I'm Steve King, and I worship Nyarlathotep.
No, not really. I'm just Heath, and I won't be worshiping anything this morning. But I will be your host. Welcome to the office. We're going to have a great time. I've got my coffee ready, because now it's time for the morning grind.
If you could become a fish, that would be amazing. Then I could command you with my mental fish powers.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. How are you doing? I hope well. Was yesterday productive for you? Yesterday was not productive for me. That's just completely blew yesterday. So I'm trying to get things turned around here today because there are things to do, including getting ready for some online gaming. So I want to go ahead and get this started. We can have our big bash on March 2nd. March 2nd, that's a Saturday. But I want to go ahead and get started doing some other gaming more regularly. So, because I do think we can get something going with even playing some play-by-post things, even during the morning grind. I was thinking about that yesterday. I watched several different diplomacy videos yesterday, and I tried out one of the web diplomacy games a couple of times yesterday. So that was fun. That was a lot of fun. And see things like that. I'm thinking of, like, why would you want to have a often people play those games like play by post games where it's like, I noticed every 24 hours or every day they resolve the turns. Well, why would you want to have a faster one? Well, why not play in person? If you're trying to get it resolved, in a single day, play an entire game in a single day or just a few hours. Well, what if you're doing something else? What if you're doing something else? But you could certainly sit down and issue orders for a few minutes if you're resolving a turn like every 30 minutes or every hour or something like that. So, but I got to make sure we were looking at how to set up one of those games on one of those platforms yesterday. I didn't go back to that because it was just faster to go to, I believe it was web diplomacy, and just start. But that was fun. That was fun. I'll have to look, see it, like what happens if we start one where you've got to submit orders every 15 minutes or something like that. Could be fun. I played a really good game as the United Kingdom yesterday and thought I was going to win, but I think that I actually messed up some orders or something and let Italy get around me. So I may have actually just I thought I was going really well, but then things got out of control. But it may be because I actually messed up giving orders. Thank you so much, Stray. Stray just gifted a membership. Who got that? Oh, did I post a? I don't think I posted a link to the Discord server. Let me post over to the Discord server. I forgot about that. So that's over there now. Inner Light got it. Thank you, Stray. So Inner Light just got a membership gift. Thank you very much, Stray. Very generous. All right, so here, let me, if you're not sure what we're talking about here, or if you're coming in later and checking this out, the sign up link I put in the chat, but then here, let me take this down and add that. Want to play tabletop games but don't have a group? Join us for RavenCon, the online tabletop gaming convention. RavenCon is hosted in an online coffee shop where your avatar can walk around, meet people, and interact with them like at a physical convention. When you sit down at a table, the software connects you to a video call with everyone at the table and brings up the virtual tabletop where everyone can play. We've got lots of great games built out and ready to play, including Hero Quest, the classic game of dungeon delving,
Shadow Dark,
the old school style RPG by Kelsey Dion,
Dragon Strike,
TSR's answer to Hero Quest,
Wizard's Quest,
the classic Risk-like Avalon Hill game. We'll be adding more games as we go. The next RavenCon event is coming soon. Sign up to know when it launches and enter to win free admission to the event. You can also learn how to enter the giveaway for over $500 worth of dice. Let's play games and have some fun. Click the link below to sign up. It's time for RavenCon. All right, I'm excited. I need more ways to play games instead of just talking about games. Hey, Tomocrat. But speaking of talking about games, what I thought we would take a look at today, I thought I wanted to look at some other things as far as diplomacy goes. And so we had talked about, this game right here. I didn't press the share button. Was this Game of Thrones board game? Because this has come up a couple of times as well. And it is similar to, where is it? It is similar to diplomacy. Oh, I actually thought I had my physical copy sitting right over here. It might have moved over to the closet. Oh, but I thought it was down here. Oh, well. But the Game of Thrones, the board game. Now, I have played this. Good morning, Sable. Good morning, Mike. I have played this, but it has been a long time. And I thought that it was a pretty good idea when I read it. That's why I took it to one of the in-person gaming groups. I was like, all right, we should play this. And it seems like a good idea to have based the Game of Thrones off of the diplomacy game because of all the politics and things in the books. It seems to make sense that, oh, hey, wait a minute, we could replicate that using diplomacy. And I've been thinking a lot about, like, especially what Sable was saying yesterday. There was like, well, the game itself is pretty simple. The rules are pretty simple, but it's all interaction. I'm talking about diplomacy. It's all interaction between the players, which makes this so interesting. Which you do lose, of course, when I was just playing like as an AI, playing against all AI components. You couldn't talk to the AI opponents. So obviously you're losing something there, although there is apparently this variation on diplomacy called gunboat diplomacy, where you're not allowed to talk to each other. You just have your all of your moves do the speaking for you. So so I guess it's more like online gunboat diplomacy, but still it was interesting, like, you know, the interface, the how to move, what things do for you. Man, those navies are tricky. The fleets are tricky because I always forgot that a fleet could move onto a land square. It's a coastal square. They can't move inland. But I mean, number of times I forgot that you could move navies or fleets into coastal squares. Um, they're sneaky. They're sneaky. Um, so with the back, so I was going down with that line of thought because we were talking about different exploration mechanics. So we're talking about, you know, some kind of play by post game, and would we have you go exploring and things? But diplomacy and this one right here are both great examples where you don't actually go and explore a territory, as in find out what's there. You know, there's no exploration mechanic. And that's because it's all about interaction between players. I was thinking about that with War of Kings as well, that you don't start next to each other. And you start next to each other in diplomacy and also in Game of Thrones here. So I guess there's a decision to be made in game design. Are you trying to make your game about interaction between people? Or are you trying to make it more about what's happening just on the board from the rules perspective? If you want it to be more about people, then maybe you should drop the exploration mechanic and move people's starting locations closer to each other. Lots of potential opening moves that gets players interacting a lot faster. If you've got a bunch of blank space on the board where you don't know where another person is, I might not even know where anybody is potentially, and have to go exploring through different hexes or different territories, well, then that is a different style of games. I was thinking about that in terms of game design yesterday. That I was thinking, well, how do we make this call? Well, I think we make the call about whether or not exploration is a big part of the game, depending on what the emphasis of the game is going to be. And it seems like a lot of the fun here, like in diplomacy and stuff, has been interaction with players. So that's what I was thinking about yesterday with regard to that. And when we came to Game of Thrones, well, interaction between players is a lot. So I can see taking diplomacy as a base, although they also do some other things to add some other random elements into it and some other things that theme this game more heavily. It's not just a reskinned diplomacy. There are some things I like about this. There are other things that I didn't think quite worked as well, but there's some other things in here that I kind of like, and we'll talk about those. So this says the Game of Thrones board. Has anybody played this one? Has anybody played the Game of Thrones board game here? A Game of Thrones, the board game, is a game for 3 to 6 players based on George R. R. Martin's best-selling A Song of Ice and Fire novels. In the Game of Thrones, the board game, players each control one of the 6 great houses seeking dominance over the land of Westeros. By mustering armies, conquering territories, and forming alliances, each house strives to control the most castles and strongholds so it can ultimately claim the Iron Throne. Okay, so at the end, so this has a time limit. At the end of the 10th round, the house that controls the most areas containing castles or strongholds are the winner. So this game, you're also not trying to build out castles and strongholds. Those are just established on the board. So if that's also thing we were talking about, if you think about the timeline of the War of the Five Kings, you're not really going around and building all new castles. Those have already been built long before, and this is a war over a few years where you're not trying to construct whole castles. Oh, James says Candace and I have played it. What did you think, James? Did you like it? Okay, so there's a lot more stuff in this. You can see here: game board, player screens, plastic units, order tokens, power tokens. I do like order tokens. Being able to use order tokens for hidden rules or hidden orders, rather. Influence tokens, power tokens. I also kind of like what's going on with the power tokens. Supply tokens. There is supply, of course. I like, of course, a feature of diplomacy, and one of the features that I wanted to be included was they wanted to be sure was in War of Kings was that your army can't militarily outrun your supply, you like your economics. So that's here. In both games, they're abstract. And this one is well, I guess maybe a little more. It's a little bit different from diplomacy, but still, you're not using like supply currency. You're not looking for different types of supplies, just like in diplomacy, where you've got supply centers, which are generic. You've got general supply tokens here. James says, just once it was just the two of us, which made it clunky, but we made it work. Yeah, I think this is probably another one of those that like filling up all the players are probably better. All the player slots are probably better. That seems, I don't remember how many people we had when we played. It might have been 3 or 4. May have been 4. But it's been so long. And I see a lot of people writing about diplomacy that you want to be sure that you've got all the slots filled. Reference sheets, dominance tokens, garrison tokens, neutral force tokens. So there's a tide of battle cards. That actually adds, that's an option. It says optional game module. I forgot about this, that enhances the risk and uncertainty of combat. So if you want to add more randomness to combat, there is tides of battle cards. So as you can see, there's a whole lot here. Let's see. Let's skip setting up the board. So here's the diagram of the board. Hey, good morning, John. RPG Exile says, Game of Thrones by Fantasy Flight. This is cool and new to me. Very cool. I think, like I said, I've only played this once, but I think that it kind of went overboard a little bit. I think there was a little bit too much, and I think that had to do with theming for the world. There's a lot of, so I'm wondering, like, okay, could you take something like this game, step it back a little bit, but then we also talked about adding a little bit more random element to combat. Although this game does have an optional module for more randomness in combat, because this is also does not have dice or anything like that to determine battle. Okay. Everybody's got a screen too. You can play Stark, Greyjoy, Lannister, Martell, Tyrell, and Baratheon. Important terms. Be sure to read and understand the following terms before continuing. A unit, you've got plastic ships. So you have, in this game, you do have ships. You have footmen. You have knights, though, and siege engines. Now, also, siege is something that I would like to be able to include. You don't specifically siege things here. And I was trying to think about that yesterday and a little bit this morning. I was going, how do you incorporate something like that into like a play-by-post kind of game? Because you can't have players make decisions outside of the turn, outside of the play by the time when they're actually issuing orders. So you can't say, "Oh, I attack." I'm attacking. I got some units in this particular territory that has a castle in it. Oh, somebody else is attacking me. Do I retreat to the castle or do I stand and fight outside? Or okay, they retreat into the castle. Do you pursue and lay siege to it, or do you move on? That would have to be. You would have to put that in your orders in a play-by-post kind of situation about what you wanted them to do. But you don't want the rules to get too complex either for the orderings either. You don't want the orders to be, okay, do this, and if this happens, then do this. And if this happens, then do this. And if this other thing happens, so the orders become like a chain. You don't want that. You do want simplicity in ordering. But then what happens after that needs to be predictable. So I'm still thinking about this. I'm thinking about this quite a bit. But you do have ships, footmen, knights, and siege engines here. Hey, good morning, Zero the Blade. Home area, the land containing the printed shields of its house. So we've got, just like in diplomacy, you've got home areas, which is, I was also learning to work with. Because several times also in diplomacy, I was like, oh, well, then once I conquer this over here, I'll be able to build fleets down there. But you can't. You got to build it always in your home area. So that's important. So that's a similarity there. Turn order, house player, enemy opponent, friendly armies, available power. I kind of like what's going on with power tokens here. I'm going to think about that. Hey, Doc Flamingo. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Mike says, a siege prevents supply from entering the castle due to it being surrounded. Perhaps castles would have some amount of time before they would be captured due to supply lapses. Right, yes. That's exactly I think so too. Now, Mighty Empires has that. And I now I need to go back and look at Mighty Empires from the play-by-post perspective. Like, how could you take because there was a lot of things from Mighty Empires. That was the Games Workshop game that I liked. And one of the things that I liked about Mighty Empires was that it's got supply, and it's not just the abstract supply like diplomacy and this has, where you're counting up supply tokens. And then, okay, that's the number of armies you can have, but you're actually getting some currency. You actually have supply tokens in Mighty Empires that you can stack up at a castle like that, or a fortification, or whatever they call it, to withstand sieges, or that you can supply armies with to go on a rampage with. So, so that if you want to send your armies on campaign, you need to send supply with them, and you can capture each other's supplies. And so that was a good part of that. Zero the Blade says, surprise, this doesn't say Song of Ice and Fire someplace. So that probably, let's look at that in just a second. Doc Flamingo says, a well-prepared fortress could hold out for months to years. Right. But in those games, you had to prepare it. Like in Mighty Empires, they could hold out for a long time, but you as the player had to make sure that it was well supplied. If you didn't make sure it was supplied, it wasn't going to work. George R.R. Martin's A Game of Thrones, the board game. That's a good point. So this does not have the HBO logo on it, right? Because George R.R. Martin still controls us. No, it's because Game of Thrones, HBO. So this must be done just with George R.R. Martin, because A Game of Thrones is the title of his book. Game of Thrones is the title of the series. So you can't use Game of Thrones without going through HBO. So obviously this is not so this means this is not an HBO. This one didn't go through the HBO licensing. This one must have gone direct to George R.R. Martin and become A Game of Thrones. So that's interesting. Well, no, a lot of things are Ice and Fire, because if you see Game of Thrones without the A, Game of Thrones, and then the HBO logo, that comes through HBO licensing. But George R.R. Martin can still license things that are A Song of Ice and Fire, and he does, like A Song of Ice and Fire. That's why the what's the name of that company? Oh, CMON. That's why CMON's game is Ice and Fire, is The Song of Ice and Fire. It's not Game of Thrones, because it's licensed through George R.R. Martin and not through HBO. Okay, so let's see. So this is what it looks like when it's set up. Did it tell you you select the house. Each player places victory, supply, and influence tokens on the game board as instructed on his player screen. Oh, yeah. So I was wondering, how do you know the starting setup? Is this in here? Because I didn't see starting setup. So the player screen tells you what your starting setup is. So like in diplomacy, you have a starting setup, which is also nice. Because like in Risk, you have to setting up the board as part of play. Dr. Flingo said, yes, but he sells specific licenses to one party or another and might limit the use to avoid conflicts. But no one wants to deal with the Battletech mech warrior situation. Right. But yeah, I was thinking, I had just naively, I hadn't thought about this game in a while, but Game of Thrones, I was thinking, oh, so that's HBO. But actually, there's no HBO marker on here. So. Okay, so the game round. A Game of Thrones, the board game, is played over 10 rounds consisting of the following 3 phases. The Westeros phase, skipped in game round 1. The top card of each Westeros deck is drawn, after which each card is resolved in order 1, 2, and then 3. Westeros cards represent important game procedures and events. This is one of the things that's adding a random element to it. Then the planning phase. Each player simultaneously assigns face-down order tokens to each area containing one or more of his units. And then action phase. The order tokens assigned during the planning phase are now resolved. The majority of player activity in the Game of Thrones board games takes place during this phase. So this is a little bit different. I'm not sure how you, I mean, I don't know if people are playing this like by post or not, but once you put down your order tokens, there are still player decisions that need to be made in the action phase. So it's not completely deterministic just from the order tokens, because there are things that okay, we've given these orders, but then there are things that you could go back and forth on. And you're trying to get to, if you get to 7 castles or strongholds, you're the winner. Otherwise, at the end of 10 game rounds, whoever wins holds the most is the winner. So during the Westeros phase, which you skip on the first one, you draw these 3 cards and they do something. Advance round game marker. Advance the game round marker 1 position. If the game round marker was on the 10th space, it's not possible. The winner. Okay. Draw the Westeros cards and advance the wildling track. Count the number of wildling icons on the 3 revealed Westeros cards, if any, and move the wildling threat token toward that many spaces on the wildling track. If during this step the wildling threat token reaches 12, a wildling attack is immediately resolved. Ignore any surplus wildling tokens. So we do have this wildling attack, which are like the barbarians, obviously. But this is also handled abstractly in this game, because you don't actually have like wildling armies that are up there that attack, because then they would be just attacking the Starks, right? And then nobody, they handle the wildlings abstractly for the following reason in this game. Because if they actually had army units and were moving like an army unit, well, they would only attack the Starks. And so the only people who would care about them would be the Starks, until the Starks are taken over and then the wildlings start to move further south, which is very book-like. Nobody's really worried about them because they're up there in the north of the Starks, and it's really only the Starks that are worried about them. That is very book-like, but it would put that player, I believe, at too much of a disadvantage for the kind of style game they were going for. And so wildling attacks are handled abstractly, and if the wildling attacks succeed, it damages all the players. But in order to defeat the wildlings, the players have to cooperate by sacrificing their power tokens. So there's a bidding system. There's a hidden bidding system. So it incentivizes you again to be conniving here, because it's kind of, well, it's a game situation. It is a game situation, but game in the other sense of like statistical, mathematical game theory, where you want to preserve as much of your power as possible. So you don't want to expend your power to defeat the wildlings. If other people will expend their power to defeat the wildlings, then you're an advantage because you didn't spend any and the wildlings are defeated. But if nobody spends enough to actually defeat the wildlings, then the wildlings damage everyone. So it's an abstract system that is supposed to be hitting the theme of the diplomacy-like kind of game again. That's the way they went with that. The Night's Watch is not its own faction, no. Like you're using your power tokens to power the Night's Watch when the wildlings come by. Like here's one, Web of Lies. Here's one of your Westeros cards. Support orders cannot be played during this planning phase. So this is one thing that I think I would probably eliminate. Some people might like it, like if I was talking about building further or modifying a game like this, because like this one's telling you certain sort of orders cannot be played in the next phase, which is a random draw. So if you like randomness, then here's an element of randomness that's coming in. But we talked about where do you want to add randomness into the game. So I was also thinking about the symmetry versus the asymmetry. So in this game and in diplomacy, your armies, your movement, your navies, all of that are completely symmetrical. Everybody's got the exact same ones. What's asymmetric in diplomacy is the geography of your starting area. So that's what makes it different. And you randomly choose one. Everybody randomly chooses one at the beginning of the game. And so it's asymmetric because your starting geography is different. And therefore the network of the board surrounding you is different. This is similar. Like, we're not trying to say, okay, this side has this type of cavalry, and this side has this type of cavalry, and this side only has this unit type. Everybody, as far as that goes, is the same. So, and I kind of like going that way, actually. So everybody's force structure is the same. So once you know how to play one, once you know how to play, you know how to play them all. But what's changing is your geography. So your geography also changes in this. But then you also have this added element of randomization here. So I guess this is one of the random elements that when I think the cards even control when you can create new forces and things. So you don't know when that's coming up. So what is your element of randomization? Well, what the cards are going to do to you. I think that might be a misstep in this game. Because there's a lot of stuff here. Mike says random events could be things like weather, poor crop yields, etc. These could impact things like supply battles, etc. Right. So I'm for a random element. I mean, it seems like diplomacy is fun without it. But I think I would add in a random element, but I don't think I would do it this way. I think I would. Well, of course, they've got an optional component here where you can add a random element to the battles. But I kind of think that rather than having, I can't play support orders, I think I would place the randomness on the battles. Now, not a lot of randomness, but some randomness in the battles to account for things like the weather, which comes up a lot, poor crop yields. Because the randomness in any of these games, I think, strategy game or role-playing game, is supposed to account for everything else that could be happening in this that we're not specifically accounting for, right? That's why we like do random damage in an RPG often, because random damage in an RPG, because we're not trying to account for all of the different. Did you hit this part of the armor or that part of the armor, or where the lace was, and then was the blade perfectly aligned for cutting, or did it hit a rib, or did it hit this? Okay, we're not going to worry about that. So instead, what we're doing is we're going to say random damage to account for all of that. By the way, I was also thinking yesterday about the play-by-post role-playing games, and I was thinking, why don't those work as well as something like a strategy game? And one of the reasons I came up with is because you've only got one item too. Like in a strategy game, you're probably issuing multiple orders and things like that in a single turn. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to do when you're order planning. On a role-playing game, if you got one character, hey, I swing at the orc, that's just not enough. So I was trying to think about that. I was like, what's the fundamental problems with doing a role-playing game like that? And that's a pretty fundamental one, I think. I'm not sure how you would fix that. And also the party is generally moving together. So in a play-by-post game, you're not playing the players, right? So I think there's some fundamental underlying differences there. So supply cards, armies require enormous amount of supplies to function efficiently. Food, water, steel, horses, clothing. Without adequate provision, an army will quickly deteriorate. So when resolving a supply Westeros card, so the supply only matters, or it gets adjusted when you draw one of these supply cards, and it tells you that, okay, this round we're going to be updating all of our supply. When resolving supply Westeros card, each house in turn order counts the number of supply icons printed in areas it controls, and then moves its supply token to the supply track to reflect that level of supply. So supply icon right there. So that's like the supply centers in diplomacy. Each column on the supply track has a resulting set of flags. The flags illustrate the number of different armies and maximum number of units in such army that a house can field on a board. So, for instance, a house with a supply of 3, meaning they control 3 tokens, at the time that card was drawn, you put your supply token on 3, and 3 would mean that you can support 4 armies. Over here, right here. Sorry, I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. But 3 is right here. 3 means you can field 4 armies, 1 with a maximum of 3 units, and then 3 with a maximum of 2 units. And then any place that only has 1 army is not, or 1 unit is not considered an army. That element of living off the land or living off of a certain amount of a productivity in a particular territory is something I use for War of Kings, and I do like that. Okay, as long as there was a certain amount of productivity in a territory, then you could support one army. Now, I called them armies in War of Kings, but if you were trying to mass armies, that's when you needed to actually think about more about logistics. So I do like that element. I like that element here. I think I might see. It makes me kind of want to just have currency or something, because it seems a bit arbitrary to say it's a 3, 2, 2, and 2. Why can't you just mass like you like? Now, maybe there's a limit to the number in a particular territory, but I guess that's keeping. There's a lot of counters in this game, but I guess that's keeping you from having to move around a whole bunch of different counters. Good morning, Robert. So Robert says maybe that's because all the realms serve the Night's Watch. It's not a faction. Plus, it has no aspirations for the throne. It's neutral. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. That game was only about the ones that were trying to fight in the War of the Five Kings. So after a player adjusts its supply, so you get a supply card drawn. So if you don't have a supply card drawn, you don't have to worry about this. Maybe you're higher or lower in your supply or whatever. But as long as there's no supply card that's drawn, you don't have to actually go to the trouble of resolving that. But then randomly the card will come up. Oh, now it's time to think about supply. Everybody adjust your supply. In the illustration above, Stark, after a player adjusts supply, he must ensure the actual number and size of his armies on the game board do not exceed the supply limits. If his armies do exceed the new supply limits, he must immediately remove units from the game board until his army number and size conforms to that allowed by his position on the supply track. So a player is allowed to have fewer than the limit. That's fine. Although a knight or siege engine units, so knights and siege engines are stronger than footmen and ship units. They only count as one unit for the purposes of supply. So that's an advantage to using a knight. A knight is more powerful than a footman, but they both use the same amount of supply. Although a player may gain or lose supply icons on the game board throughout one or more action phases, his armies are reconciled only when the supply track is adjusted. Now that is an advantage. So, why would you do it this way? And that's because in some games, you would have to update that immediately. Oh, I just lost a supply, I gained a supply, I did this, lost, gain, and that goes by multiple times in the turn. It does seem better to just say, all right, we don't worry about that until it comes to the supply card. But the problem to me, is that the supply cards appear randomly, when you need to actually start considering that. I think I would, I'm not a huge fan of these Westeros cards anyway. I think it's something to continue on with. So I think I would just say after a certain number of rounds. I do like fall, winter, spring, summer rounds. I think that's pretty neat. So after a certain amount, then everybody has to consider their supply or something like that. Yeah, because I like having the logistical element, and I like having the military dependent on the economics. A player is never allowed to take an action in the game that would cause him to exceed his actual supply limit as dictated by his position on the supply track. See, mustering cards. When the mustering card comes up, that's when you can raise armies. The mustering Westeros cards represents the effort of the great houses in calling their bannermen to action in training and outfitting warriors, assembling ships, and constructing massive engines of war. You guys want to know, okay, when can I build more units? Well, in this, you can only build more units when the muster card comes up. Then everybody can muster. When resolving the mustering Westeros card, each player in turn order must recruit new units into each area, or may recruit new units into each area he controls that contains a castle or stronghold. Each castle or stronghold provides mustering points, which must be spent to recruit new units in its area. Now, this one you can recruit in another location that's not your home territory, but it has to have a stronghold or a castle. Strongholds provide 2 unit points worth of mustering. Castles provide 1 unit point worth of mustering. And then a footman costs 1 unit, a knight costs 2, or you can upgrade a footman to a knight. A ship costs 1, and a siege engine costs 2. A mustered unit is taken from its player's unused unit and placed directly onto the area of the castle or stronghold that's providing the mustering points in order to muster it. A footman unit located in a mustering area may be upgraded to a knight. Okay. A player must never muster a unit that would create or expand an army beyond his supply limit. In other words, if mustering a new unit would cause a player to have more or larger armies than allowed by his position on the supply track, the unit cannot be mustered. So this is dividing supply from where you can muster. Now, there might be some that have both supply and mustering points on it. But I do like the idea that, I need to go capture more fertile regions or something. So I guess this does preserve that. Yeah, if you're here, please do hit the like and subscribe button. That would be great. Thank you for the reminder, Stray. An area containing a castle or stronghold is unable to muster or upgrade a unit. Its mustering points are lost. You don't get to bank them. Each player must resolve all of his mustering for areas containing castles and strongholds before the next player can start mustering. There's an order determined by a track here. Ship units, like other units, are mustered in an area containing a castle or stronghold. Unlike other unit types, though, ships units can only be placed in a port connected to the mustering area or in an adjacent sea area. Ship units cannot be mustered into sea areas that contain one or more enemy ships. If a castle or stronghold area has no port or eligible adjacent sea areas, no ship units can be mustered there. Remember that 2 or more ship units in the same sea are considered an army, and so must conform to the house's supply restrictions. While it might be more accurate to call multiple ship units a fleet, the term army is used for simplicity. Unlike ship units, footmen, knights, and siege engine units may never be mustered in ports or sea areas. Makes sense. See, Clash of Kings. The Clash of Kings card tells everybody that remove all influence tokens from the 3 influence tracks, the politics track, and then players start using those power tokens I was talking about to bid for positions on these tracks. So those are also what's used to defeat the wildlings. So you see, if you use them to defeat the wildlings, you can't use them for your own benefit on the influence tracks. And so there are 3 different influence tracks. The iron, where are they? Where's my list of different types of influence tracks? The court, the something, and the whatever, the politics. So everybody secretly bids a certain number of their power tokens, and then the power tokens are discarded, and whoever wins becomes first, and then you rank order everybody on these tracks. And it's really nice to be the one that's sitting on the Iron Throne. There's a throne track, because that one, in the event that there's a tie on the board, because there's not randomization on the board, in the event that there's a tie on the board someplace, the guy on the Iron Throne gets to adjudicate the tie, gets to decide who gets it. And except for in combat with this Valerian Steel Blade, that's the person who resolves ties in combat. So there's another player. You can tie, except for you can't tie because there's a player at the board who is there to adjudicate ties. And right, unlike in diplomacy, great point. Unlike in diplomacy, Mike says, you can have multiple units in an area at once. So you're not stuck with just one. You can have multiple types of units, but you're counting power, which is something I like about this game. Of course, the diplomacy is very interesting with the everything is one. Oh, by the way, which makes it it seemed like in diplomacy, as I was just playing against the AI, it was really hard to trap and destroy somebody's unit, unless that unit was mine, and then it seemed like that happened quite a bit. But like trying to hunt down and make somebody rout, and so they're destroyed, that one was rough. Rough to actually make happen. You had to really plan to make that happen. And sometimes you just wanted to, like, man, I just need to build up a larger army in Picardy or something. I don't know. But you can't. But I do like that you can mass, because that's what the supply does. So like, this is what the supply up here was telling you. So if you have a supply of 3, you can have 1 territory that has 3 units in it, and then 3 territories that have 2 units in it. That's what your constraint is. And then you could have all your other territories just have 1 because they're living off the land. So during a 5-player game, this is an example here, the Clash of Kings card has been drawn. Bidding now proceeds to the fiefdoms track. Each player hides his available power behind his screen and secretly places a number of power tokens in his hand, making a closed fist. The bids are then revealed simultaneously with the following results. Lannister bid 4, Baratheon 3, Stark 3, Tyrell 2, Greyjoy 0. Therefore, Lannister gets the first spot on the fiefdoms track, placing his influence token in 1. Baratheon and Stark are tied for the second highest bid. Greyjoy, who currently controls the Iron Throne dominance token, decides the Baratheon's influence token will be placed on the 2 position and the Stark on the 3. Tyrell, being the 4th highest bidder, places influence at 4, while Greyjoy, who did bid the least, places this in 5. Okay, so what are these tracks? So the Iron Throne track, the order of influence token on the Iron Throne influence track determines the turn order. When resolving anything in turn order, always start with the player whose token is at the 1 position, followed by the player whose token is in 2, etc. The player whose token is in position 1 of the Iron Throne influence track holds the Iron Throne token. So if you have that, so that track resolves things in order. We're talking about we have to have some type of way to resolve initiative. But in a play-by-post way. So this is one of their ways. Mike says, can you, as part of the negotiation with another player, offer power tokens as part of the deal? That's a good question. Can you trade power tokens? I'm not sure if you can trade power tokens or not. We'll have to see. We'll look out for that. I don't remember that happening. But I'm not sure if it's possible or not. So the player holding the Iron Throne token decides all outcomes of all ties that occur in the game with the exception of ties in combat. Those are resolved by the player's position on the fief's tracks and ties in determining the winner of the game. The Iron Throne token does not change hands until bidding for all the Iron Throne track has been resolved and the influence tokens have been placed on the track. Thus, the player controlling the Iron Throne token still breaks ties when bidding on the Iron Throne track, even though he may lose the Iron Throne token after the bidding is over. The fiefdom track, the player with a higher position, closer to 1 on the fiefdoms track, wins ties in combat against a player on a lower position. The player whose token is in position 1 holds the Valyrian Steel Blade token. Remember, all ties outside of combat and also determining the winner of the game are decided by the Iron Throne token, including ties for bidding on the fiefdoms track. But if you are holding the Valyrian Steel Blade, once per game round, use this token in combat to grant yourself +1 combat strength bonus. Whenever a player uses the Valyrian Steel Blade, he flips the token over to its faded side, indicating that it has been used this game round. At the end of every action phase, flip it back up. The King's Court track. A house position in the King's Court track determines the number of special order tokens available to that house during the planning phase. The higher a house's position on the King's Court track, the greater the number of special order tokens available to that house. A player whose token is in position 1 on the King's Court holds the Messenger Raven. The number of special orders provided by the King's Court, I'll show you what special orders are in just a second. But the number of special orders that you can issue are determined by your order on this track. And the Messenger Raven, the player holding the Messenger Raven token may perform one of the following actions at the end of every assign order step. Replace an order token. The order holder may swap one of his order tokens on the game board for one of his unused order tokens, or look at the Wildling deck. So this is one of the situations where the orders are issued and then a player has another choice, right? Because the player who's got the Raven could swap out, go, oh, look at what everybody put out there, and went, oh, wait a minute, I need to change something. And they're the ones who can change something once the order is out. Hey, Vision. Assign orders. During this step, each player must place exactly 1 order token face down on each area he controls that has at least 1 of his units. All players place their orders simultaneously. An area cannot be assigned more than 1 order token. While players may not reveal orders placed to other players, they are free to plead, cajole, and or suggest strategies to each other during this step. There are 5 different types of order tokens. Now, What's important here, also from the perspective of thinking about this from play by post or from that kind of game design perspective, is that you're putting one of these order tokens in a particular territory, not per like army or something like that. Who participates in the order is something that you choose again when it comes around to resolving the order. So march orders, defense orders, support orders, raid orders, and consolidate power orders. So those are the things that you can do. And actually, I kind of like these types of orders right here. So the order tokens depicted above are regular order tokens. Each player has 5 special order tokens, which are stronger variants of each order type marked by a star. Special orders are described later, but this right here would be a special march token. See, it's going to give you +1 to your march when you attack. You use march to attack, march to move, or march to make an attack. So in this case, your attack power would be increased by 1. But this is a special order, which you can only use a certain number of depending on your position on a track. A player may use any of his 10 regular order tokens during the planning phase, but may only use a number of special order tokens equal to the number of stars printed next to his position on the King's Court influence track. Then you go to reveal orders. Those are down, and again, as I said, by territory. Reveal orders. All orders assigned to the game board are now simultaneously revealed. Simply flip up all orders face up, revealing their order types. They'll be resolved later in the action phase. Then you can use the action phase. Use the messenger raven, rather, to swap out one of yours, or look at the top of the wildling deck if you have the messenger raven. So, raid. Order token summary. Raid. A raid order represents aggressive incursions and pillaging of enemy lands. They aim to disrupt enemy plans and drain him of precious resources. A raid order is resolved during the first step of the action phase by expending itself to remove one adjacent enemy support, consolidate power, or raid token. This I like the raid idea, but I was a little bit unhappy with its implementation, because really what I want raid to be able to do, and I like the idea of being able to raid, not to conquer territory, but to destroy supplies like a chevauchee, especially if you're playing like in the medieval era. I want the raid order to be something that you go out and destroy the supplies of like the enemy in an adjacent territory. Like how many supply points do you get to supply your armies? Well, if you're just doing raiding, you're not conquering territory, but you're just taking out the supplies of somebody who's next to you, or something like that. So I like the idea of being able to raid, but I wanted its implementation to have to do with supply, but it doesn't. It removes a support, consolidate power, or raid order that is adjacent to it. March order represent the movement of troops and ships across the lands and seas of Westeros. Only by assigning a march order to units on the game board can players take control of new areas and engage opponents in combat. March orders are resolved during the second step of the action phase. When resolved, all raids are resolved first in the order of that particular track on the board. Then all march orders are resolved. Players have 2 normal march orders, one with -1 combat strength modifier and another with a +0 combat strength modifier, as well as one special march order. Defense order. Defense orders represent the preparation of strong defensive positions. So this is rather than building castles, you issue defense orders. Defense orders represent the preparation of strong defensive positions. They grant a combat strength bonus to the defender of the assigned area. The bonus is indicated by the number printed on the order token. Unless removed during the action phase by losing a combat in the assigned area, for example, a defense order will contribute its defensive bonus against any number of attacks against its assigned area during the same game round. Each player has 2 normal defense orders, both providing a +1 combat strength modifier as well as one special defense order. Mike says, perhaps in the game you're thinking about, raids have logistical and economic consequences, not just military consequences. Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking that I would want to implement raids in a game, and you're striking at the underbelly, the economic underbelly of your opponent. I'm thinking about the 100 Years' War. I mean, that was particularly famous chevauchee raids across France that the English would conduct. And of course, chevauchés were also conducted in other medieval wars. But the English would take their army and they wouldn't be interested in holding territory. So that would be a distinction between holding territory and scorched earth, burning down of villages and denuding things of supplies. You're out there taking an army to go and try to destroy the economic base of your opponent. So that would be two different things, I think. And how you capture territory is also important. And what capturing a territory means. I was forgetting that in diplomacy too, because a territory can be a color. And that's why I was thinking about trying to trap and destroy somebody's unit. But I kept forgetting that just because that you can actually in that game retreat into a territory that you don't control. And so I think, haha, I've got them. There will be no place for them to retreat to. But then they can actually capture something in a retreat. But because I think in a lot of other games, if you don't control something, then you can't retreat into it. But I guess it just means it depends on what the game means by controlling something. So the support order is also something like in diplomacy. Support orders represent both logistical and martial assistance to forces engaged in nearby battle. Not only may support be granted to a player's own combat needs, but to that of another player. This makes the support order the fulcrum of negotiation and intrigue in the Game of Thrones board game. That's very similar to diplomacy right there. During the declare support step of combat, supporting units adjacent to the embattled area may add their combat strength to one of the two participants in the adjacent combat. And that you don't have to declare during order phase, because it says, first of all, it says they may add, but then also they don't have to declare during the order phase what they're doing. So this is assuming you're all sitting there at the table, of course. You can then start to make other calls. And I believe that's the case with the march order as well, that you're saying, hey, I'm going to march, but you don't have to declare what units are moving and where they are moving until it's actually time for that order to be resolved, and then you do that. In that way, I kind of thought this game, there's a lot, because there are a lot of decisions to be made after the orders are turned over. It's not deterministic after that. There's still a lot of decisions to be made. And so in some cases, I was like, well, so why are we going through the hidden order process? But then also consolidate power. Now, I like consolidate power. Consolidate power represents the garnering of local favor, the collection of tax income, and the harvesting of resources from areas under the player's control. They're the most direct way for players to gain power tokens from the power pool. How do you gain power tokens? By consolidating power in a territory. Consolidating power orders are resolved during the third step of the action phase. When resolved, order tokens is removed from the game. When resolved, consolidate power orders are resolved during the third step of the action phase. When resolved, the order token is removed from the game board in exchange for gaining one power token from the power pool, plus one power token for each power icon printed on the assigned areas. You can't consolidate power on the sea. So then's the action phase. The first thing you do is resolve raid orders, then resolve march orders and resulting combat, then resolve consolidate power orders, and then clean up. So all the raid orders go through being resolved in whatever order that was on the whatever track. Basically canceling out other tokens. Example of raid order resolution. There are 5 raid orders on the board. Lannister has raid orders at the Reach and the Sunset Sea. Greyjoy in a raid order on the Summer Sea. Tyrell has a raid order on the Dornish Marches, while Baratheon has a special raid order at the Stony Sept. The turn order decided by the Iron Throne track is Greyjoy, Stark, Lannister, Baratheon, and Tyrell. So Greyjoy resolves raid orders first. This is the track. Then Lannister, then Baratheon, and so forth. Then you resolve march orders. In turn order, each player resolves one of the march orders on the board. If a player has no such orders remaining, he simply skips any further action in this step. Cycling through. So you cycle through your march orders. So everybody on that track resolve one of your march orders. Then somebody else resolves one of their march orders. Then the next person resolves one. And the next person resolves one. And if there's still more, you go back and cycle through. Moving to adjacent areas. Basically what you would expect with movement. Although, interestingly, advanced strategy tip, it says, a player can stagger movement by placing several march orders in adjacent areas. In this fashion, if a unit is able to move a unit is able to move more than one area in a turn. This is accomplished by marching units into an area containing another friendly march order, and later, when resolving that second march order, moving that units into a new area, potentially containing a third march order, and so forth. But see, so right here, there's a decision to be made. A player may move all, some, or none of the units from which are assigned a march order. So when you're assigning that march order, you're not having to say, these 3 guys, or just this knight, or this siege engine, or something. You don't have to do that. You don't have to declare that now, which you would want to have to declare in a play-by-post game. And I was trying to think about that quite a bit. Like, I think you fix that by having something like a banner, call it a banner or call it an army or something that's made up of units. Like you need to know, I got Army 1 and Army 2, and the strength or a number of units in Army 1 and Army 2 that's in this territory are as follows. That needs to be declared someplace. And then you need to say, all right, now and then you declare march orders by army, not by territory, but by army. So Army number 1, march to this location. Army number 2, march from this location to this location. You would need to specify that in an order turn or an order area in order to your order time in order to do an effective play-by-post. But you don't want to get too complicated either. You don't want the orders to get too complicated. Like I said, like decision trees and such with orders, it's not going to work. Especially anything that requires any type of non-deterministic adjudication or any type of gray area. Then resolve consolidate power tokens. In turn order, each player resolves one of his consolidate power tokens on the game board. If players have no such remaining, skip. You pick up your power token for every consolidate power token that you've got there. I think that the consolidate power token idea could be used to potentially good effect. If an army's not doing anything, it hasn't been involved. What can it do? It can consolidate power, and that should give you some type of resource to be expended. I think that's pretty neat. And then there you go. That's it. Now, how do you do combat? We'll go a little bit further here. So whenever a player marches on one or more of his units into an area containing units from the house, combat ensues. Combat is resolved by comparing the total strength. We're not rolling dice here. Combat is resolved by comparing the total combat strength of the battling sides. The victor is the player who gathers the highest combat strength. The following elements can contribute to combat strength. Units in combat. So there's a lot of things that add to combat strength. Units in combat, supporting units, defensive orders for the defender only, marching orders for the attacker only, the use of the Valerian Steel Blade token, house cards, and the garrison tokens for defenders only. A player resolving the march order is considered the attacker, and his units are attacking, while opponents occupying the contested areas, the defender and his units are defending. Any supporting units are considered supporting. Okay. First, call for support. Calculate initial combat strength. Choose to reveal house cards. Use Valerian Steel Blade. Calculate final combat strength. Resolve combat. So call for support. During the first step of combat, both attacker and defender may plead for support from all adjacent areas surrounding the embattled area that contain a support order. The player who controls such an adjacent support order may now grant or refuse to grant his supporting combat strength to either the attacker or the defender. Supporting combat strength means the combined combat strength of all units in the supporting area. So that's all the combined. You can't parcel it out. Support may be given to any adjacent combat, whether it's the player's own forces are in the combat or it's between two other players. So you can, of course, support yourself. If there are multiple support orders adjacent to the embattled area, support must be declared in turn order. That's according to your track. If the attacking or defending player has friendly support orders in adjacent areas, he may support himself in the combat and will usually do so. Footmen have a combat strength of 1, knights have a combat strength of 2, ships have a combat strength of 1, and siege engines have a combat strength of 4 when attacking or supporting an attack against an area containing a castle or stronghold. Otherwise, it adds 0 combat strength. I like the siege engines too. So in this example, we got a movement here, and we got support orders around it with different houses. Tyrell is marching an army of 2 knights from the Reach into Blackwater. Oh, so right here. It contains 1 Lannister footman and 1 Lannister with a -1 march order right here. At the first step of combat, players now call for support. There are 3 support orders in adjacent to the Blackwater. King's Landing, Tyrell has 1 knight. Stony Sept, Lannister, 1 footman and 1 knight. And Harrenhal, Baratheon, 1 knight. Lannister announces he's supporting himself from the Stony Sept with 3 combat strength. Baratheon announces his support to Lannister from Harrenhal. And finally, Tyrell announces he's supporting himself from King's Landing for 2 combat strength. At this point, the battle, Tyrell has 7 combat strength, 4 for the attacking knights, 2 for the support from King's Landing, and 1 from the +1 march order. There's the +1 right there. Lannister has 6 combat strength, 1 for the defending footmen, and 5 from the supporting units of the Stony Sept and Harrenhal. This is ignored because that's not a defense order. Support orders are not removed from combat. A support order may support any number of adjacent combats in the same combat round. So unlike in Risk, where you're having to declare what support, again, when the support order is given, you can swap it up right there in the middle of combat or in the middle of the game and do lots and support lots of others. So calculate initial combat strength. Both players clearly announce their initial combat strength, after which the combat proceeds to the choose and reveal house cards step. So here it's not random, but this is unknown. Hey, good morning, Andrew. Good to see you. So there is there's no random element unless you're playing with the optional module, but there is some hidden element of unknown, something that your opponent you and your opponent add to the combat. So you've got these house cards that have different leaders on them. And again, this kind of strikes me as one of those things that was added in for the sake of the theme of the game, because all of these are based on different people in the game. And of course, the people in the game and the people in books people obviously like. So it seems like this was another one of those things that was added, kind of like with the Wildling cards and the Westeros cards. That seems like a thematic addition to the game that you might choose to get rid of or simplify. Because I do kind of like this idea of there being something else that's added to combat that your opponent may not know about, but that isn't random. This is a text choice. This is a choice here. So choose to reveal house card. Both the attacker and defender now secretly select 1 house card from their hands of house cards. When both players are ready, the 2 cards are simultaneously revealed and any text abilities are immediately resolved. Playing a house card during combat is mandatory. Both attacker and defender must play a card. Combat then proceeds to step 4, use Valerian Blade. Each player begins with the game with 7 unique house cards, so they're asymmetric. These represent characters lending their abilities and strength to combat. For a visual breakdown of a house card, See the diagram above. After players reveal a house card during combat, the text abilities of the two houses are immediately resolved. Some text abilities specify they are implemented later during the same combat, like at the end of combat, but otherwise do them now. There are instances when the exact order of house card resolution is important. Should a timing conflict occur, follow the order of operations. Any ignore or cancel text is first resolved in the order of the Iron Throne track, and then any other one by the order of the outcome of the track. At the end of combat, you don't get these cards back. After a card is played, it's placed in your discard pile, and then only after you've cycled through all of your cards do you get them back. At the end of combat, if a player has used his last 7th house card, then he returns the other 6 house cards currently to his discard pile to his hand, and the last card played remains in the discard pile. I didn't really get that working too well, I remember, in the game that I was playing. So I was like, all right, well, I'll play this card. And then I realized, oh, it's actually very difficult to get that card back. So you do have to think about which one you want to play, but you're required to play one, and you're going to have to cycle through them. So I didn't get that the card mechanic working for me like I wanted to. But the combat icons, so how do you remove a unit? Some cards do not have a text ability. Instead, they provide their player with combat icons. There are 2 combat icons. The sword icon. During a combat resolution step, the player who won the combat counts the number of sword icons on his house card. For each sword icon, an enemy unit in the embattled area must be destroyed. So that's how you do that. You want sword icons when you win, then you can destroy units. On the other hand, fortification icons on the house card negate swords. All house cards, whether available or used, are public knowledge. As such, a player's discard pile or hand may be examined by other players at any time, except during step 3 of combat. I guess when we're choosing house cards. Then you use the Valerian Steel Blade. If either the player, the attacker, or the defender holds the Valerian Blade token, you can add +1 if you want. Then you calculate the final combat strength. Both sides now combine their initial combat strength with any modifiers accumulated by playing house cards and using the Valerian Steel Blade token. The final value is referred to as the player's final combat strength. What are you guys thinking about this? Stray says, I was a war game I played that I kept stealing unit banners and we won the battle from it. What do you guys think about this in relation to diplomacy? Or what else would you want to see out of it? Which one would you rather play? So calculate your final strength based on all of that. And then combat resolution. Determine victor. Highest strength wins. Ties are resolved by the fiefdoms track. Only the defeated player takes casualties. Casualties are determined by the victor's sword icons and then defeated player's fortification icons. Count the number of fortification icons on the defeated player's house card. Yes, that's canceling stuff out. Defeated player suffers casualties. The defeated player must destroy 1 unit in the embattled area for each sword icon the victorious player uses minus your fortification tokens. When a player suffers casualties, he decides which of the units are removed, unless stated otherwise by a house card, a special ability. Supporting units can never be taken as casualties in combat. Generally remove footmen first. Retreating and routing. After suffering casualties, the losing army must retreat from the embattled area. Supporting units do not retreat. If the attacker lost the combat, his surviving units must retreat back to the area from which they marched. If the defender lost the combat, his surviving units must retreat using the following rules. The retreating units must retreat to 1 empty adjacent area, 1 containing no enemy units or power tokens, or to a friendly area, 1 containing friendly units or friendly power tokens. So those power tokens are also used to claim territories, which I like. So just because you move an army through it doesn't mean that it's yours. You have to expend a power token in order to actually claim it. So you can retreat to an empty or to a friendly. Retreating units must retreat to the same area. Retreating units may never retreat to an area the attacking units marched from, even if it's empty. A player may not retreat his defending units to an area containing friendly units if this would cause him to exceed his supply limit. If a player's only option is to retreat to such an area, he must first destroy as many retreating units as necessary to be in compliance with the supply limit after getting to retreating to that area. If there are no legal areas in which to retreat, all retreating units are destroyed. So that's also how you take out units. Trapping somebody, causing them to rout, and then that's it. After retreating, all retreating units are placed on their sides to signify they are now routed. Routed units provide no combat strength but still count toward a player's supply limit. If a routed unit is forced to retreat, it is instead destroyed. Routed units may never be chosen as casualties in combat and may not move, even if a march order token is resolved in their new area. Stray says, I like this. Sable says, this one is certainly more complex. It is more complex. And I wonder if it's doing exactly what you want it to do. I really, really wanted to like this game a lot. Or if it's trying to do too much, especially with the theme. Mike says, I like to have an order of operations, but there are a lot of steps that might be unnecessary. I would need to play to know. See, that was kind of my feeling too. Like, we often come up with games like, well, this is the one, this is the baseline, this over here is the 5 complexity or whatever. And we keep looking at like, well, maybe there's like an 11 or like a 3 or something, what's between those things. Hey, if you are here, I'm going to put the link to the RavenCon, our online gaming convention, where we're gonna play some games online and in our online coffee shop. Please click the link there if you're just coming in and you haven't seen that yet. Other retreat, if you would like to play games with us. Other retreat rules: retreating and routing example, combat cleanup. So here are the special orders, and I kind of like this idea too. See, I'm feeling like the special orders and the house cards need to be combined. Maybe come up with some other way to deal casualties or something. I would come up with some other way to deal casualties other than routing, so that you have some kind of loss, just battle loss. But maybe you could combine something with these special orders and the house cards, because here are the special orders. In addition to 10 normal order tokens, each house has 5 special order tokens. A player may use any of his 10 normal order tokens during the planning phase, but may only use as many special order tokens as he has stars on the King's Court influence position. For example, in a 5 or 6 player game, the player on the highest position on the King's Court may use up to 3 special order tokens per game round, while the player in a 4th position may only use 1 single special order, etc. So in this is a special defense order because it gives you +2 to defense. Here's a special march order that gives you +1 when you're attacking with a march. Here's a support order that also gives you a +1 when supporting from that area. A raid token. A token can be used as a normal raid, or it can instead be used to resolve to remove any one adjacent defense token. Special consolidate power. This token can be used as a normal consolidate power token, or can be used to initiate mustering in its area. So that's how you could muster on your own terms, by having a special consolidate power token. Only the area that was assigned the special consolidate power token can muster. If there's no castle or stronghold in the assigned area, no mustering can take place. So while special orders are purely better than their regular counterparts, they also have an additional subtle advantage. Having access to 3 instances of an order type rather than 2 can be of tremendous benefit to many strategies, such as launching a major offensive, quickly accumulating power, etc. In the icy north, an army of barbaric wildlings gathered to descend upon the continent of Westeros. If the wildling threat token reaches 12, or if there's a wildling attack Westeros, it is a wildling threat attacks. So determine wildling strength. Check the current position on the wildling threat token. The number printed on its position is the strength of the wildling attack. Bid power. Each player hides his available power, the power tokens behind the screen, and then secretly bids a number of power tokens in a closed fist. Once all players have made their bids secret, that's the Night's Watch strength. determine outcome. If the strength of the Night's Watch equals or exceeds the wildling strength, the wildling attack has been defeated. But you see, you need your power tokens for other things. But then consequences of a wildling attack. After the outcome of a wildling attack has been determined, players face the ramifications of success or failure. Reveal the wildling card. Draw the top card of the wildling deck to determine the reward or penalty they will receive. Resolve wildling card. If the Night's Watch successfully defeated the wildlings, the player who bid the highest amount of power receives the reward under Night Watch victory. If the wildlings are victorious, the player who bid the least amount suffers a severe penalty, while the other players suffer a lesser penalty. All the severe and lesser penalties are described in the wildling card under wildling victory. We can also do ship transport here. So the use of ships to transport land-based units is a very important aspect of a Game of Thrones, the board game. It allows knights, footmen, and siege engines to take advantage of the seas to travel faster than they would be able to on foot. If any two land areas are considered adjacent for the purposes of marching and retreating when they are connected by consecutive sea areas. So you don't have to issue convoy orders in this. Your ships can just act basically as bridges. In other words, ship units in consecutively adjacent sea areas form a direct bridge for knights, footmen, and siege engines to move or be moved directly from coastal areas to another coastal area in one move. There is no limit to the number of times a player can use the same ships for transport in a given round. The same ship units may even be used multiple times with the same march order, transporting units from the area assigned a march order to different destinations. Unless they're routed, of course. While land areas connected by ship transport are considered adjacent for purposes of marching and retreating, they are not considered adjacent for any other purpose. See, here is establishing control. A house is said to be in control of an area when at least one footman, knight, or siege engine in the area, or has previously established control in the area by placing a power token there. If a player vacates a land area with one of its units, he stands to lose any benefit gained from controlling that area unless he chooses to establish control. When a house vacates a land area, all of its units leave with a march order. The house may elect to establish control by placing a power token from its available power in the vacated area. And I think I kind of like this. I think there's something that could be done with this. Of course, you do have to choose. It's one of those choices that you have to make as you leave. But just because it might be easier to say, once you enter an army into it, then you are in control of it. But on the other hand, if you're making a distinction between, then you could make a distinction between empty. Well, you have control of it while your army is there. But when your army moves out, are you going to be putting administrative control in a particular territory? And if you are, then you need one of these control tokens, and you do that by consolidating power in other areas of your kingdom. I kind of like that. I mean, I kind of like that idea. Once placed on the game board, this power token represents the support of local nobles as well as investments in guards, tax collectors, and bureaucrats loyal to the controlling house. A power token on the game board is returned to the power pool only after an opponent takes control of an area. But they do not aid the defender in combat, nor do they count as power icons printed on the game board. Important, a player may only establish control when vacating an area with a march order. Events that would leave an area vacant, such as negative effects from wildling victory, do not permit a player to establish control or after the last unit is destroyed. But you do have some that are printed on some of these control icons that are printed there. Each house has a home icon marked by its house shield, printed directly on the game board from the beginning of the game, which you always have control over. Unless somebody comes and takes control from you. Alliances. Ports, those allow you to build ships. You can build ships just out in the ocean, though. But there are a few other special rules with ports. Especially like going out and doing merchant trading with people overseas. Neutral force tokens. Garrisons. Garrisons are special unit tokens that provide extra defense to the home area of each house. That I think this is, we tried to get that working in War of Kings as well. Each house starts the game with garrison tokens on its home area. Garrisons are not units. They do not count towards supply limits and may never be assigned in order. If a home area containing a garrison is attacked, the strength of the garrison printed on the token is added to the defender's initial combat strength. If there's no units defending a location with a garrison token, combat still occurs as if the garrison were a unit. You may never issue orders to an area containing only a garrison. Game board features rivers, bridges, island areas, influence tracks, hidden information, how do you adjust for fewer players. The tides of battle. See, this is the additional randomization of combat. Mike says maybe this could be done with supply lines tokens or something. Maybe. I think I like it. I just think it could benefit from some streamlining. See, this is the tides of battle. If you want more unpredictability and deadliness, then here you go. This increased risk can make negotiation even more vital, gaining support in combat more critical. It creates additional drama and casualties in combat and breeds entirely different strategies for you in your Game of Thrones board game experience. Before playing, all players should agree whether or not to use this option. If agreed, shuffle the Tides of Battle into a single deck, placing it near the game board during setup. The Tides of Battle makes the following modifications to combat. Drawing Tides of Battle cards. After choosing and revealing house cards, the attacking and defender player each draw one Tide of Battle card from the top of the deck and privately examine it. Before revealing the two Tides of Battle cards, if either the attacking player has the Valyrian Steel Blade, he may use it to discard his first Tide of Battle card and draw another one to replace it. He then flips his Valyrian Steel Blade over to its faded side, so that's its use. Revealing Tides of Battle cards, each player reveals the Tide of Battle cards, adding the specified combat strength modifier. And then you also get casualties by swords, or potentially could. After resolving casualties from sword icons, players resolve any skull icons on drawn Tides of Battle cards as following. So there can also be skulls on this. If a player's Tide of Battle card features a skull icon, the opposing player must suffer one casualty regardless of which player was victorious in combat. Oh yeah, the sword only helps you if you win, but the skull could take you out even if you lose. The casualty is in addition to other casualties dealt during combat and cannot be prevented by fortification icons. So, because otherwise there'd be no way to lose anything if you win, or lose anything. You're never going to have a situation where you're going to lose units if you win combat. Or likewise, you're not going to be fighting off the combat and lose units. So I really wanted to use this game to like this game a lot. And I only got to play it once. Oh, Battles of Westeros? I had never seen that. That kind of looks like battle lore, kind of. But I only got to play it once. But I think it's a little bit over the top, and I think that comes from trying to get it themed so well. But I think there's some interesting to... oh, hey, PH, just here at the end. But I think there's something to it, and I think there's something that is going in a right direction if you want something a little bit more than the chess-like diplomacy, I think. All right. There's a lot going on, so I'm going to get out of here. But please do click the link, and if you want to play Hero Quest, Dragon Strike, Shadow Dark, One Night Werewolf, we're going to do this all online at RavenCon. If you're here, please sign up because it does. Mike says it does do the theme well. It does. So that was clearly a heavy part of this game and the game design, making sure that it was themed wildling attacks and everything like that. Please click that link, sign up. I will be in touch with everybody. I will talk to you. Oh, is this the game tonight? Is this the Super Bowl? Is that it? I didn't even know. I guess that might be what you're talking about. I hear people talk about the Super Bowl. All right, I'm going to go. I got to do some writing. I got to get ready for some gaming. I got to do a bunch of things. It's time to be productive. Everybody, go forth, be creative, be constructive, and grind on. I'll see you later.